Welcome, buddies, to part 2 of SmithersCast 5 tips for new competitive teams. And of course, it's not just for new teams, but current teams can maybe also learn from this as well, remember? So just going to go through 5 tips. Tip number 1, buddies. Tip number 1, we're going to go ahead and start off with squad leads in Recon tanks, okay? So I have a match in front of me. This was an ECL matchup between EJIG and Valkyrie here on Foy Night. Okay, so once again, going back to what we said yesterday, or we talked about yesterday, when it comes to certain maps and being able to understand, hey, what do we need to do off of the opening maybe that can give us a little bit more advantage because the map presents these sort of challenges, okay? And with Foy Night, or Foy, whatever you want, whatever you're playing, but usually off the opening, we do see a lot of teams have truck snipes, okay? And EGIG adapted to this, and let's go ahead and watch a clip right here from how did they overcome this issue, okay? Let's go ahead and watch a clip. So EGIG is the allies, right? So they're coming in, and usually we see the Axis cap first on most of the points, I would have to say, on Foy. Maybe, depending on the opening, but usually we do see the Axis cap first. All right, here on this screen, we see EGIG just had a truck snipe happen to them, so they lost a whole bunch of bodies right there, a whole bunch of blueberries, and obviously that's going to lead them to not have as much cap pressure on the point, right? But if we look at the top of our screen right here, we do see a Greyhound, right? Now, let's go ahead and go here. Greyhound is burning, so the Greyhound has taken a hit right there. The truck is also burning. The truck is pretty much only has the driver left in it. But the Greyhound has a surprise for us. Truck gets blown up as to be expected. The truck was this was a fantastic play by EGIG, right? The truck was going in front to act as bait pretty much at this point. The Greyhound is, no, maybe EGIG will say, it was just dumb luck, buddy. Maybe it's just dumb luck. But the truck was going in front of the Greyhound, and this way the truck will take that first shot, right? Meanwhile, the Greyhound is right behind them. And the Greyhound may have just enough time to, get in the trench here on Southern Edge. Because Southern Edge is wide open, right? And trucks can get easily sniped on this point. But Greyhounds, remember, you're not worried about bullets, you're just worried about tank rounds and rockets, right? Let's keep going. The Greyhound goes into the trench. Right? Meanwhile, I'm as a caster, I'm following this going, wow, that's pretty cool, right? They got into the trench. However, I zoom in, and what do we see here, guys? We see an SL inside of the Greyhound. Solo Greyhound driven by a tank driver right there, or a tank crewman. And then you have the SL inside of it, right? And what does that mean? The SL can jump out, get an outpost in the trench, and suddenly they have 6 bodies inside the hard cap here on Southern Edge, right? Giving them a nice cap pressure boost. Now remember, when you're in the circle, you count as, I think, my buddy said that you count technically as 2.7 bodies. Okay, 1 body, so that's why they rounded up to 3 most of the time, right? But you're in the circle, count as 2.73, right? And so you do that math, you get 6 people on there, you're essentially looking at 6 times 2, you're looking at between 15 and 18 cap weight, right? Inside the point if you're able to fill that OP. We have 1 body over here, this Blazer guy, but he's going to be out in the open, could potentially gun down. Nice play there with the squad lead. What a brilliant play from EJ. What a brilliant play. A newer team, right? Learning how to adapt to different maps and everything, maybe what kind of strategies you can use. Never forget, don't want to underutilize the Recon vehicles, okay? Put squad leads in those light vehicles, or those Recon vehicles, right? And try to get them to the hard cap a little bit easier, because remember, they'll survive an arty round. So if an arty round comes in and tries to get the opening truck, that's fine. But then if you have a squad lead in the Greyhound or the Recon vehicle, Puma, whatever it may be, clown car for the Russians, or Daimler for the British, the squad lead will survive and they'll get inside the point. Remember, you could put 2 squad leads in there, right? And then they're in the strong cap, they put down their OPs, and then you flood those OPs real quickly because all the guys that died in the truck can swap to those outposts, right? And next thing you know, they're inside the hard cap. Just a little extra tip there for those newer teams out there that may be curious how they can best utilize their resources. Once again, let's watch this one more time. Void Knight, famous for truck snipes. Rockets sail over. This truck is taking a beating. Greyhound moving towards the point. Behind the truck right here. Once again, fantastic. Truck is essentially a decoy at this point. Gonna take that first opening round. Truck gets smashed. Greyhound gonna have enough time to dive into the trench. And look at that. Perfect. SL gets out, put out to the OP. They flood the OP. They get a lot of cap weight right there, buddies. That is my first tip for this session for newer teams out there looking to maybe learn how to get an upward advantage, right, on the teams. All right. So we'll jump on to tip number 2, just a sort of a adjacent tip to this tip. But don't forget that you can put SLs on top of tanks, right? If your Greyhound is full with SLs, then you can put SLs on the light tanks, right? Just ride on top on the back, maybe go prone, whatever it may be, and they can journey into the point as well if you want to do that, right? So there's plenty of little things like that you can utilize to your advantage, depending on the maps, of course, to try to get that little bit of a boost off of the opening to help capture the midpoint, right? And of course, don't forget, guys, you can load these SLs in Recon vehicles throughout the entire game and send them around or send them into the hard cap, whatever it may be, and just try to get them around a little bit quicker. Because remember, if the SLs try to go by themselves around the map and walk, they're prone to getting shot. But if you're in a Greyhound, you're obviously a little bit more noticeable, right? But if you're in a Greyhound or light vehicle or Puma, whatever it may be, you can shimmy on by the infantry that maybe try to shoot by you and maybe go into the forest if you're on a forest map and hide in certain places, right? And then the Recon vehicle can take you and ferry you off to a certain spot, and you can jump out partially off the way, and there you go. So don't forget to use Recon vehicles with SLs. Don't just send Recon vehicles by themselves. Always try to at least pack one SL in there just to see if they're able to do something. Okay, so that's tip number 1, buddies. So in tip number 2, sort of. Okay. All right, so tip number 3, we're gonna go with airheads. All right. Alrighty, let's talk about airheads, everybody. So in my opinion, there are a couple different ways you can use airheads in the game. Number 1, you can use the airhead for an offensive standpoint, right? So let's take a look at this game right here. Here on Omaha, this was against Zoo in Seasonals. So Seasonals is the big time playoff game, or big time games for the PC side. All right. Sort of like the console version of Summit. Now, I just called in a bombing run here. And when you call in a bombing run and you destroy the garrison, you should immediately think to your head that, hey, I just destroyed the garrison on point. And even if they're able to reset it within 10 seconds, that's at least a 50-second delay timer on the redeploy or deployment for any bodies on point, right? Because you have a 40-second Gary spawn time plus that extra 10 seconds for them to find where to put the garrison up or drop supplies, whatever it might be, right? And that gives your team, and how long does it take to cap a point? It takes 2 minutes, right? So think about, hey, 40 seconds of that 2 minutes, 50 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever it might be. That gives your team that little bit of an advantage. So that's why usually you see in the competitive scene, if teams are attacking the point, they destroy the garrison, they're gonna go for that push. Okay. All right, let's go here and we'll look at the map real quick. And if we take a look at the map, so once again, I'm gonna go ahead and bring up my pen here. All right, we have our pen here. All right, let's take a look at the map situation. If we have our tanks down here to the bottom. We have well, actually, hold on. We have 2 heavies down here to the bottom. We have a medium, and we're pushing on Verville-sur-Mer, the midpoint right here. And we have a good attack going on. We have OPs in the back line as well. So a lot of things are going right now. Plus, I just dropped a bombing run on points. So there's a little bit of chaos for the upper facing zoo right here. Usually for airheads, in my opinion, once again, you have 2 real situations. You can use them for defensive airhead, or you want to use them to support the attack, okay? I'm not a big fan of just dropping the airhead let me go ahead and just back up here. If we were in this position, if we're in this position right here, I'm not a big fan of just saying, hey, let me just drop an airhead right here, right? because even with the bombing run and strafing run, chances are team's going to stop it. Especially a good team, they're going to hear it in the sky, they're going to go and drop it, and they're going to be able to take care of it. So I'm not a big fan of that. I would not do that hardly ever at all. Now on the console side, I think maybe you can get away with it a little bit easier because there's that bug right now with the airhead sound and everything. But at least from my perspective, I don't do it that way. But let's go ahead to the later in the game here. Okay, bomber run has been called in on point. It destroys the garrison. And now I'm thinking, hey, now's a great time to drop an airhead, right? We just got the garrison on point, and they're going to be scrambling to get up something new. We have a great attack going. We have a light tank in the back line right here harassing them. And I am looking for an airhead spot, right? And usually for airhead spots, you basically want to go off of your squad lead's OP location. And that way you could see, hey, which OP is clear. Now I could have dropped it over here, could have dropped it over here, but this is, I guess it's give or take, right? But I decided to drop it up here behind the house, and so they can take this road going down into the point. Now, once again, it's about being familiar with the map and terrain and everything, right? And I saw this OP is clear, so I said, hey, I'm going to drop it by the clear OP. There are a couple of benefits to that, right? You know the area is clear because the OP is clear, or well, you can assume it's clear within a certain amount of radius. And then two, that the bodies spawning on the OP can protect the airhead. They can protect the airhead from any sort of attack, right? And that's how you can sort of think of that, right? And you want to make sure to call out in command chat during the game saying, hey, I'm dropping an airhead. Can you guys protect that, right? And so just keep that in mind. Okay. And also try to look for buildings and stuff, right? You don't want to drop it off in the middle open field. Just be familiar with the terrain. And primarily, you see teams most of the time drop it by buildings. Or, of course, there's a strategy of pushing two heavies forward, two heavy tanks or multiple tanks, whatever it might be, and dropping the airhead behind the tanks so you can use that as a good protection barrier. Okay. And then, of course, the other way to use airheads is on the defensive standpoint, right? All right, for this situation, for the defensive airhead, we are playing Climbers United here on Stalingrad, and we are doing very well and everything, but the attack, it's Climbers United is really defending Yellow House, and we're not able to get that ground to capture the point, right? We had a few close calls, but it's just not happening. And you have to come to realization that as a team to say, hey, we're up 3-2, there's 10 minutes left to go or something like that, right? It's fine. We're just going to hold the line. Here we have, we're defending train station right here, and the game is running low, or game is running out of time and everything. And this is where I just say, hey, let me just use the airhead ability. There's no point in dropping on the attack back here or anything because they're gonna get it. And what's the benefit, right? Maybe we're gonna either go 4-1 or 3-2. It doesn't really matter unless you're playing in a certain tournament where they count more points towards going up 4-1 versus 3-2. But anyways, here on train station, a few minutes left to go. I'm looking for the airhead position, and I just say, hey, I'm gonna drop an airhead on the defensive point train station. And I just look around the map right here, and I say, okay, hey, I'm going to either drop it maybe back here or just somewhere down here, just to have an extra spawn point towards the end of the game, because we've all seen crazy, wild things happen in Hell Let Loose. We've all seen it. And I don't want that to happen to us. Why not just drop an airhead? You have the manpower. Now, be careful. You want to make sure you have enough manpower for reinforce. But why not just drop an airhead and make sure that everything is just all nice and safe, right? Your team has an extra spawn, no matter how many Garys or outposts you have, just have an extra spawn there, buddy. Nothing wrong with that. Plus, it gives your team a little bit added sense of security. 6 minutes left to go. I go ahead and drop an airhead right here behind the point, and that way we have a nice little extra defensive measure back there, extra spawn wave, or extra spawn point, if you will. Plenty of tanks around the point, so I am sitting nice and pretty as commander right now, and I'm feeling really good about this game, right? So once again, you can use airheads on the offensive, try to find an OP or building to put them by. Not a big fan of just throwing them out there in the middle of nowhere with a bombing run and strafing run combo, unless you're super desperate just for anything to happen. And maybe you can get lucky, right? But try to put those situations off, because it's 400 manpower, right? It's 400 manpower. And you can use that for encouraged and converting to munitions or fuel, whatever it may be, but it's 400 manpower, which is pretty expensive. Try to find a spot to put it for the offense, to assist the offense, right? Or save it for a defensive airhead moment, and just try to find a nice safe spot to put it. Okay, that is my opinion on airheads. All right, let's go to tip number 4. I think we're on now. 4. I mean, there are multiple tips in that, right? But main 4. Dedicated. Let's talk about tip number 4. Dedicated MGs. All right, everybody, once again, tip number 4, dedicated MGs. What you will find at a lot of really good teams is that on their roster, they have people that are purely dedicated to playing machine gun throughout most of the game, if not the entire game. Why? Because machine gunners can hold down so much area in one spot, right? They can just go on a glider wing, they can go on top of a building, they can just hold down a road, and they could just be in one spot, right? And fire till their heart's content. Reload, fire again, hold down, suppress the enemy, block a lane for approaching. There's so many different things, right? MGs can do. They can destroy vehicles, or supply trucks and transport trucks, right? But let's go and take a look at an example here from this match I just recently cast between STDB and BWCC. Okay, we are on SME with Hospice as the midpoint, and let's take a look at the map, shall we? Once again, going to my handy dandy pen tool, but how many MGs do we see on the screen, everybody? Well, let's take a look. We have one MG up here, Devil May is right there. We have one MG over here, Norvald, holding right there. And let's see how many other MGs we have. 1, 2, we have a Hala down here, so that's number 3. And I think there was number 1, maybe he's on the redeploy or another one, but we also have Klee over here. All right. And then I think there was more back here, but this is a good enough example here. What advantage does a dedicated MG guy provide your team? Well, what they'll tend to do is that they study certain spots before the game, right? To say, hey, these are the primary MG spots where we can cover a lot of ground or lanes that we can hold throughout this match. All right. Let's take a look at these guys. So Devil May, what is he doing up here, right? Well, he's on top of the chimney right there, and he can hold down this area back here. He can go look over here. He could see any enemies that are sneaking all the way around way back here, right? All from this one spot. And then also he can flip around, do a little flipperooski, and he can face this way. And suddenly he's covering this gap right there. Or he can go down here and watch this entire courtyard right there. Okay, I gotta be careful about these shapes I'm drawing. All right. So all that is covered by this one guy pretty much. Now you may say, well, he's on top of a chimney. He can get easily picked off, right? Well, what happens if he gets picked off on top of that chimney? Then you're alerted just like that to saying, hey, there's people in the back line that are shooting down our MGs, right? But that's partially on the machine gunner to communicate to say, hey, guys, I've gotten shot in the back line. We may want to check on that, right? And this Devil May guy, he can look back here and he can see these guys over here, these guys over here, right? I think Devil May in this case was facing this way. But if he sees anything ping on in the back line as far as garrison outposts, he can do a quick little flipperooski, like I mentioned, and he can see all those guys and mow them right down, right? Now, what is Norvald doing here? Norvald is monitoring Pizza Slice Road, right? He's dedicated to that spot to monitor the road and make sure, hey, am I supporting my buddies moving down the Pizza Slice Road here on Hospice to make sure they don't, are they covered? Can I just hold this lane for them to be able to push up, right? And so another lane he can hold. Let's go to Klee. Klee is watching this road, right? He's looking down to see, hey, are there any BWCC guys making their way across? Can I stop them from, going over here, going up here, right? He's holding that lane. Then we see Valhalla. I think he may be on the building right there, if I remember correctly. And so he's facing this way. He's be able to cover this. He can cover that, right? So all this different area is covered. All these different areas are covered by machine gunners. That is the power of having dedicated machine gunners. You'll see this more so on maps like Foy Night or Foy just in general to hold down those open lanes and everything. And then, of course, SME with all the different rooftops you can get on and everything. But anyways, this is SME, but on checkpoint 2 with the holding the different lanes across the open fields and everything. But this is a fantastic example of having dedicated MGs on your team and all the different lanes they can hold. But part of this, of course, is studying beforehand, like we mentioned yesterday, looking at all the games, all the different MG spots that teams have and everything, and where your team should be allocating machine gunners, right? Some teams have 3, 4, 5 dedicated MGs for some matches, especially on maps like PHL. You want to have a lot of MGs on there. All right. So the last one we have here is recon squads. All right, everybody. Once again, tip number 5, talking about recon squads. All right. Now, this will be a very controversial topic, I feel like, but the recon system, the recon flare system is completely broken. Teams can spam recon flares and get constant intel on where the enemy is, where their tanks are, if they have anybody in the back line, that sort of thing. And in Hell Let Loose, for these competitive matches, intelligence is king. If you know where the enemy is, then you just have to focus on where they are, right? And figure out how to adapt to that situation. And if we look here in the opening, now flares are probably have some of the biggest impact during a game on the opening. STDB loaded out, they come in and everything, and they look at they go towards hospice, and the recon squads usually are immediately responsible for firing flares off to the point, and that way teams can know where the enemy medium is. And if your armor crews know where the enemy medium is, then they can figure out where they need to move, right? Because as I've covered in a few shorts of mine, or a few more educational videos that I've done, once the enemy medium is taken out, then that releases the light tanks, the recon tanks, and the medium for your team to push up, because now they don't have to worry about any tanks. They just have to worry about AT pretty much, right? And the medium can push up and wipe out the enemy's light tanks and recon tanks until, that in the beginning where the enemy heavy tanks start to come up, right? But usually have like at least a 6-7 minute buffer after the opening in order to for those tanks to come up, right? Because you have the generated fuel time, you have the drive time up to the point, all that, depending on the map, all that kind of stuff, right? And that's why you see teams fire off the flares off of the opening as far west as possible, or as far away as possible into the enemy's backline, so you can identify where the enemy tanks are. And of course, so artillery can adjust as well, and your team can know, hey, this is where the enemy's mainly allocating, and this is where we need to shift arty, this is where we need to shift more bodies, that sort of thing, okay? Here we have STB firing off a flare right here, as you can see, and that provides them intel onto the western side of Hospice. They have this flare here, right? And then down to the south, they'll they can flare off another one right here. And then some teams even have such good flare crew or recon crews, they can fire off, essentially have 4 flares on the map at one time. So you pop one, reload through an expo ammo box, fire 2 more off, right? You have complete intel. If your team is not spamming flares, you are throwing the game. I'm just saying that right now, because once again, it's a broken system. The recon guy can fire one, go to an explosive ammo box, fire another one. Oh, immediately. There's nothing holding them back. And they can find another expo ammo box, so it has to be a different one, remember? Reload, fire again. You can have a recon guy fire off 3 flares in about 15 seconds, right? Maybe even more than that. It's very broken, right? And I feel like they're going to need to fix that either through a cooldown at a later point for the recon flare, or a munitions cost. Maybe it's like, hey, each flare costs 25 munitions. And so that way there's a cost to the team. Right now there's no cost. The recon guys usually are either instantly redeploying, they're running to the front line to get killed right away, or whatever it may be. But your team needs to be utilizing recon flares as much as possible. You need to spam explosive ammo boxes all over the map. You need to drop ammo crates as if you're the commander, if you have extra munitions. Hell, spawn a Jeep later in the game if you have extra fuel, just to drop Explo boxes all over the place, right? But your team needs to be spamming recon flares to get as much intel on the map as possible, okay? STB knows, hey, this is what's all on this side of the point, right? And we can spam another one down to the bottom, one through SME, and we can essentially see where everything is going, okay? Where the enemy is, essentially. And yeah, okay. I think that covers pretty much all the different, or the 5 points I wanted to cover today, everybody. So just a quick recap. We have squad leads and recon tanks. Don't forget to utilize the recon tanks and put SLs inside of those puppies. For the opening of the match, as we saw with the EGIG clip, diving them into the trench, right? And that way your SLs are protected from bullets off of the opening. You can use a transport truck as a decoy, okay? And you can, and then later during the game, if you're struggling to make something happen, ferry some SLs in a recon vehicle around the map and get them to a nice safe location, and then drop them off, and the recon vehicle keeps going, and the SL jumps out and goes into hiding, okay? Tip number 2 was off the opening, you can put a squad lead on the back of a light tank, right? And so they can jump on back, and they can be ferried towards the point or wherever it may be. And don't forget, so pretty much don't forget that infantry can ride on the back of tanks. Airheads, mainly 2 different situations. You want to use the airheads, as we talked about in the examples, but you want to use them to assist the attack, or you want to use them as a defensive measure in the last minutes of the closing of the game. Here, STB did use an airhead later on. All right, for the airhead example, remember, we can use the airhead defensive and offensive. Here's the offensive example that STDB had, right? The squad leads had their OPs up in that little nook and cranny here in Hospice, and they were able to plop the airhead right there, okay? Now, in this case, BWCC did a really good job of wrapping around, and I'll cover this in a different video for tips. But they dropped the airhead, STB dropped the airhead by the OPs in that little courtyard there in Hospice South, and they were able to flood the OP, and this was able to, they pretty much almost capped the point. It was at 97%, but unfortunately didn't go their way. But they use it to assist the attack. My opinion, don't throw the airhead in a random spot, uncovered, with a bombing run, strafe run. I've seen 99% of those do not work. It just doesn't against good teams, unless you're facing a team that you know you're just going to steamroll and they don't pay attention to anything. Then yeah, you could possibly get away with it. But use this, or in a defensive mode. You could rewind to the Stalingrad example to look at that one. Tip number 4 was dedicated MGs. Make sure you have dedicated MGs to watch certain areas of the map. Assign those before the game. Just say, hey, you got to be on MG. People are taking MGs they're not supposed to. You got to tell them not to. Get off MG. This person needs it, right? They got to go to this lane. They got to hold this ground, that sort of thing. Tip number 5 was recon squads. Flares is a broken system. Flares are a broken system. Just spam flares, drop expo boxes. Tell your infantry guys to drop explosive ammo boxes for your recon guys so they can spam flares, get that intel for your team and everything. You need to be using the spotter roll until they fix the broken flare system. You have to, or else the other team is going to be spamming them. They're going to take advantage of you, and they're going to know everything you're doing. They're going to know everything. There's no surprises, right? You can go into the back line. If a Gary pings, pop a flare, see where the enemy's hiding, boom, they're dead, right? And until they fix the flare system, then just make sure you're utilizing the hell out of it, okay? All right. Those are the 5 tips for today's buddies. Now, there are a few other little things sprinkled in there, but those are the 5 tips for today. And so plenty more content to come. But once again, just trying to help out the hell out of this community for those newer teams out there that are learning how to play this game and maybe getting their teeth kicked in right now. These are all little things you can do to help yourself out. Okay. If you have any other questions or anything I had maybe said below, go ahead and drop a comment. I'd be more than happy to get back to you, buddy. And of course, plenty more tips to come. Plenty more tips to come. So be sure to like, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff, guys. And all right, guys. I'll see you in the next one. And have a good one, buddy.